So this is the great Enzo Vitali, Marchetti said, spreading his arms wide as if to embrace an old friend. I expected someone taller. The gallery's private viewing room smelled of old money and older lies. Enzo stood in the center of the space, his hands in his pockets, his face a mask of polite disinterest. Outside, rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows, blurring the Manhattan skyline into a smear of gray and gold. I didn't come here for small talk, Marchetti. Enzo's voice was flat, the tone he used when he was about to break someone's fingers. I came to make you an offer. Marchetti's smile didn't waver. He was a tall, elegant man in his 60s, silver-haired and impeccably dressed, with the kind of aristocratic bearing that came from generations of old money. His hands were manicured, his shoes Italian leather. On his lapel, a single sapphire pin caught the light. A serpent coiled around a ruby. An offer, how delightful. Marchetti gestured to a leather chair positioned before a massive canvas. Please sit. I was just admiring this piece. A Caravaggio. The subject is a young girl, betrayed by those she trusted most. Tragic, really, but the art endures. Enzo didn't sit. I know about the bombing. I know about Veronica. I know about your arrangement with the Cartelli family. The words hung in the air like smoke. Marchetti's smile flickered, just for a moment, before snapping back into place. I have no idea what you're talking about, Mr. Vitali. I'm an art dealer. I sell paintings to rich people who have more money than taste. Funny. Enzo pulled a folded photograph from his jacket pocket and tossed it onto the glass coffee table between them. Because this looks an awful lot like you meeting with a Cartelli lieutenant at a restaurant in Soho. 2 weeks ago, the night before someone tried to blow up my niece's birthday party. Marchetti glanced at the photograph, his expression unchanged. This is a very clear forgery. You should fire your photographer. You should stop playing games before I lose my patience. Enzo stepped closer, his bulk casting a shadow over the older man. I know about the deal. The Cartellis take me out, you marry Veronica off to one of their nephews, and the three of you carve up my empire like a Christmas turkey. It's a solid plan. I almost admire it. Marchetti's pale blue eyes narrowed. If you know all of this, why are you here? Why not just kill me and be done with it? Because I want to know who's really pulling the strings. Enzo leaned in, his voice dropping to a whisper. You're smart, Marchetti. Too smart to be a middleman. There's someone else. Someone above you. I want a name. For a long moment, the only sound was the rain against the glass. Marchetti studied Enzo with the cold, clinical detachment of a surgeon examining a specimen. Then he laughed, a dry, rustling sound like dead leaves skittering across concrete. You think you're the predator, don't you? Vitali, you walk into my gallery with your photographs and your threats, and you think you have the upper hand. Marchetti shook his head slowly. You're a thug in an expensive suit. A man who mistakes brute force for intelligence. The people I work for are not like you. They are shadows. They have been playing this game for centuries. And you, my friend, are just another piece on the board. Then give me a name. Enzo's voice was iced. No. Marchetti smiled, his teeth gleaming white. I don't think I will. But I will give you a piece of advice. Go home. Hold that little girl of yours close. Because when the fire comes, the flames don't care about loyalty. They just burn. Enzo felt something inside him snap. He moved faster than a man his size should have been able to, his hand shooting out and grabbing Marchetti by the throat. He slammed the older man against the wall, the impact rattling the paintings hung around them. Listen to me, you arrogant bastard. Enzo hissed, his face inches from Marchetti's. That little girl saved my life. She saved my family. And if you or anyone you work for so much as breathes in her direction, I will skin you alive and mail what's left to your mother. Do you understand me? Marchetti's face was turning red, but he was still smiling. You can't win, Vitali. You can't protect her. You can't protect anyone. That's the tragedy of men like you. You think you're invincible until you're not. And when you fall, everyone you love falls with you. Enzo released him, stepping back. Marchetti slumped against the wall, gasping for air, but the smile never left his face. Get out of my gallery, Enzo said, his voice deadly calm. Before I change my mind and kill you right here. Marchetti straightened his tie, adjusting his lapel pin with trembling fingers. You'll regret this, Vitali. You have no idea what you've just set in motion. I regret nothing. Enzo turned and walked toward the door, pausing with his hand on the handle. But if I were you, I'd start praying. Because the next time I see you, there won't be a wall between us. He stepped out into the rain, his heart pounding, his mind racing. The meeting had been a calculated risk, a move designed to flush out the snake. But Marchetti had been too calm, too confident. He knew something Enzo didn't, and that knowledge was dangerous. Enzo's phone buzzed as he climbed into the back of his waiting car. It was Aldo. Boss, we've got a problem. Aldo's voice was tight, with barely controlled panic. The penthouse. We think someone's been watching it. One of my men spotted a suspicious vehicle circling the block. White panel van. No plates. Enzo's blood ran cold. How long? About 2 hours. We're bringing Elena and the girl to the backup safe house now. But boss, the van just disappeared. We don't know where it went. Get them out of there. Enzo snarled into the phone. Now? And give me a location on Marchetti's boat. I want to know where he's going tonight. Boss, what about Veronica? She's been calling nonstop. She's demanding to see you. Tell her I'm busy. And put a tail on her. She doesn't sneeze without me knowing about it. Enzo ended the call and slammed his fist against the seat. The pieces were moving faster than he anticipated. The serpent had slipped through his fingers, but the threat was still very real. His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a text message from an unknown number. Oh, asterisk. You think you can protect her, you can't even protect yourself. Asterisk. He stared at the screen, his jaw clenched. They were watching him. They were watching all of him. He dialed Elena's number, his finger trembling with rage. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then it clicked over to voicemail. Elena, it's Enzo. Call me back immediately. We're moving you. Don't trust anyone. He disconnected, his heart hammering in his chest. The driver glanced in the rearview mirror. Where to, boss? Midtown. I need to get to Elena. Now. The car surged forward, tires screeching against the wet asphalt. Enzo's mind was a whirlwind of fear and fury. Anya's face flashed in his mind. Those impossibly old eyes, that small, steady voice. She was just a child who had done nothing wrong except to see the truth. And now she was in danger because of him. The drive to the penthouse was a blur of wet streets and flashing lights. Enzo burst through the front door, his men flanking him, guns drawn. The penthouse was empty. The furniture was undisturbed, but there was a note on the kitchen counter, asterisk. The serpent sends his regards. You can't protect what you don't know. Asterisk. Enzo crumpled the note in his fist, his knuckles white. He had been a fool. He had underestimated his enemy. And now Elena and Anya were gone. Get me every man we have, he roared. I want every street corner, every warehouse, every hole in this city searched. Find them. Now. His men scattered like roaches, their footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. Enzo stood alone in the kitchen, his hands shaking, his vision blurring with a rage so deep it felt like drowning. His phone buzzed again. Another text from the unknown number. It contained a single photograph, a grainy image of Anya sitting in a room he didn't recognize, her face pale but composed. She was holding her stuffed bunny, her small hands steadied. Don't hurt her, Enzo whispered into the void. I'll do anything. Just don't hurt her. He didn't realize he had said it out loud until his phone buzzed again. Asterisk. The deal was never about the Empire, Vitali. It was about breaking you. And we've already won. Asterisk. He stared at the screen, his mind reeling. The serpent didn't want his money. He didn't want his territory. He wanted revenge. But for what had Enzo done to inspire such hatred? The answer came to him in a flash. A memory, buried deep in the darkness of his past. A name. A face. A betrayal long forgotten. He pulled out his phone and called Aldo. Dig into Marchetti's past. I want to know who he was before he became an art dealer. Who he worked for. Who he loved. I want to know his whole goddamn life story. Boss, we've got a lead on the van. It was spotted heading toward the docks. The old shipping yards on the Hudson. We've got men heading there now. Send the coordinates. I'm on my way. Enzo grabbed his coat and headed for the door, his heart a roaring beast in his chest. He didn't know what he would find at the docks. He didn't know if Elena and Anya were still alive. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty: the serpent had made a fatal mistake. He had threatened the one person who made Enzo Vitali feel human. And for that, he would pay with his life. The car raced through the rain-slicked streets, the city's neon lights bleeding into a blur of color. Enzo's mind was singular, focused. He was no longer a businessman. He was no longer a Don. He was a father, a protector. On a mission of vengeance, the docks loomed ahead, a maze of rusting containers and abandoned warehouses. The white van was parked near the water's edge, its doors open, its interior emptied, fan out. Enzo ordered his men. Search every building. Find them. He moved through the maze like a predator, his footsteps silent on the wet concrete. The rain had intensified, a driving curtain of water that reduced visibility to a few yards. He could hear the distant hum of ships, the creak of metal against metal. And then, a sound that cut through the noise like a knife. A child's voice, singing that it was Anya's voice. The same off-key lullaby he had heard her humming in the penthouse. He followed the sound, his heart pounding, his hand instinctively reaching for the gun in his coat. He found them in a small, crumbling warehouse near the water's edge. Elena was tied to a chair, her face bruised and swollen, her eyes glazed with fear. Anya was sitting on the floor beside her, still singing, her small hand clutching her mother's. And standing over them was a figure Enzo recognized. A ghost from his past. A man he thought he had killed years ago. "Hello, Enzo." The man's voice was soft, almost gentle. "It's been a long time." Enzo's hand tightened on the gun. He had been looking for a serpent. Instead, he had found a phantom. "You're supposed to be dead." "I know." The man smiled, a thin, bloodless smile that revealed a row of stained teeth. "But you of all people should know that death is rarely permanent. Not for men like us." Enzo's mind raced, memories flooding back. A mission gone wrong. A betrayal. A brotherhood shattered. He had believed this man was dead, had mourned him, had carried the guilt for years. "Your brother sent me here," Enzo said. "He was the one who betrayed us. I was just the executioner. And now you're doing this to get back at me. This is your revenge." The man laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "My brother was an idiot. He got what he deserved. But you, Enzo, you took everything from me. My name, my family, my life. You left me for dead in a burning building, and I crawled out through the ashes. I've spent 20 years rebuilding, planning, waiting for the perfect moment. And now that moment is here." He gestured to Elena and Anya. "I didn't just want to kill you. I wanted to take away everything you loved, everyone you loved. I wanted to make you feel what I felt. Alone, powerless, desperate." Enzo raised the gun, his hand steady. "You're not going to hurt them. Not while I'm still breathing. Then I guess you'll have to kill me," the man said, spreading his arms wide. "Go ahead. Pull the trigger. But if you do, you'll never know where I've hidden the other hostages. Oh yes, I have more. Your sister, your niece, a few others you might care about. They're scattered all over the city, waiting for my signal. If I don't show up in an hour, they die." Enzo hesitated. It was a classic move, a gambit designed to buy time. But it was also a very real threat. The serpent had already shown he was willing to play a long game. "Let them go," Enzo said, his voice low and dangerous. "Let them go, and I'll let you walk out of here." The man laughed again. "You think I want to walk out? I want you to suffer. I want you to watch them die. And then, when you're broken and bleeding, I'll kill you too. It's the only way this ends." Enzo's finger tightened on the trigger. He had a choice to make. He could kill the man and risk the other hostages. Or he could let him go and hope to find them in time. But then Anya spoke. Her small voice cut through the tension like a blade. "He's lying," she said softly. "He's scared. He's scared you're not scared." The man's composure cracked, just for a moment. His eyes darted toward the child, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. And in that moment, Enzo saw his opening. He pulled the trigger. The bullet hit the man square in the chest. He staggered, his eyes widening with shock. He looked down at the wound, then back up at Enzo, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. "You're not the first person to threaten me," Enzo said, his voice cold and steady. "And you won't be the last. But this is where it ends. For you, for the cartellis, for everyone who ever thought they could touch what's mine." He walked over to the man's crumpled body and knelt beside him. "Tell me where the others are, and I'll make your death quick. If you don't, I'll make it last a very, very long time." The man's eyes were already glazing over. You'll never find them. They're everywhere. You'll never." His voice trailed off into a gurgle, and then he was still. Enzo rose to his feet and turned to Elena and Anya. He cut the rope binding Elena to the chair, his hands gentle despite the violence of the moment. "Are you okay? Can you walk?" Elena nodded weakly, tears streaming down her face. "Anya, I'm okay, Mama. Anya's voice was steady, almost calm. She looked up at Enzo with those ancient eyes. He's gone now. The bad man is gone. Yes, Enzo said, his voice breaking with emotion. He's gone, and no one will ever hurt you again. He swept Anya into his arms, holding her close. She was so small, so fragile. Yet she had faced a monster and had not flinched. She had given him the opening he needed, had seen the fear behind the bravado. We need to get you out of here, he said, his voice rough. Both of you. Now. His men moved in around them, escorting them out of the warehouse and into the waiting cars. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, the first hints of dawn breaking through the clouds as the car pulled away from the docks. Enzo looked down at Anya, who was snuggled against his chest, her eyes already drooping with exhaustion. You were so brave, he whispered. You saved us all. She smiled, a small, sleepy smile. You were brave too, she said. You were the good man, the one who protects us. Enzo felt a tear slide down his cheek, the first one he had shed in years. He kissed the top of her head, holding her a little tighter. The war was far from over. The serpent might be dead, but the cartellis were still out there. Veronica was still a threat, and the empire he had built was still teetering on the edge of collapse. But for now, in this quiet moment, surrounded by the people he loved, Enzo Vitali allowed himself to feel something he had long forgotten. Hope that the penthouse had become a war room. Enzo stood at the center of it, a map of the city spread across the glass dining table. His lieutenants gathered around him like wolves waiting for the kill command. The body of the serpent had been disposed of, his existence erased from the world as if he had never been. But his poison remained, seeping through the cracks of Enzo's empire. The cartellis are moving, Aldo reported, his voice grim. They've been consolidating their positions, taking over our smaller operations in Brooklyn. They're not hiding anymore. They're making a play. How many? Enzo asked, his eyes fixed on the map. At least 30 men. Maybe more. They've brought in reinforcements from Miami. Word is they're expecting a full-scale war. Enzo's jaw tightened. A war was exactly what they wanted. A bloody, messy conflict that would draw attention from the authorities and leave his empire vulnerable. But he had been playing this game for too long to fall for such an obvious trap. They want a war, Enzo said slowly. We'll give them one, but not the kind they're expecting. He traced a line across the map with his finger, his movements deliberate. They're spread too thin. They've overextended themselves, thinking we're weakened. But we're not. We're angry. And angry men are dangerous. He looked up, his eyes scanning the faces of his men. I want a team to hit their supply lines. Cut off their weapons, their money, their communications. Make them feel isolated. And I want another team to go after their leadership. Not the foot soldiers. The generals. Make them feel hunted. And what about Veronica? Aldo asked, his voice careful. She's been calling every hour. She's threatening to go public with certain information. She's dangerous, boss. Enzo's expression hardened. Veronica is a problem I'll deal with personally. But first, I need you to find out everything she's been doing since we moved her out of the Hamptons. Who she's been meeting. What she's been saying. I want to know who else she's been working with. Boss, there's something else. Aldo hesitated, his eyes darting toward the hallway where Elena and Anya were staying. The cartellis know about the girl. About Anya. They've been asking questions. They know she was the one who warned you. Enzo felt a cold fury settle in his chest. How do they know? We're not sure. Maybe Marchetti told them. Maybe Veronica. But they know. And they've made it clear they want her. They think if they can get to her, they can get to you. Enzo slammed his fist against the table, the impact rattling the glasses. They will not touch her. I will burn this city to the ground before I let anyone touch that child. The room fell silent. His men had seen him angry before, but this was different. This was not the controlled fury of a businessman. This was the raw, primal rage of a man protecting his family. Give me everything you can on the cartellis. Their safe houses. Their family members. Their weakness, Enzo said, his voice low and dangerous. I want to know where they sleep, where they eat, where they breathe. And then I want to take it all away from them. He dismissed his men with a wave of his hand, his mind already racing. He had spent his entire life building an empire on fear and respect. But fear was a weapon that could be turned against you, and respect could be bought. What he needed now was something more fundamental, something that the cartellis could never take away. He walked down the hallway to the room where Elena and Anya were staying. The door was slightly ajar, and he could hear Elena's soft voice, reading a bedtime story. He paused, listening, his heart aching with a tenderness he had never allowed himself to feel, and the brave knight rode into the dark forest, not knowing what he would find. But he was not afraid, because he was fighting for love. And love, as we all know, is the greatest weapon of all. Anya's voice chimed in, sleepy and sweet. Mama, is Mr. Vitali a knight? Elena laughed softly. I think he is, sweetheart. But he's a different kind of knight. He fights with his heart, even if he doesn't always show it. Enzo felt a lump form in his throat. He pushed open the door, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood floor. Elena looked up, startled, her face flushing. Mr. Vitali, I'm sorry. We didn't hear you. Don't apologize, he said, his voice gruff. It's good to hear you laugh. He crossed the room and sat on the edge of the bed. Anya was propped up against her pillows, her stuffed bunny clutched to her chest. Her eyes were drooping, but she smiled when she saw him. Are you coming to say good night? She asked. I am. He smoothed her hair back from her forehead. I wanted to make sure you were okay. After what happened today, I wanted to apologize. Apologize for what? Anya asked, her brow furrowing. For not being there sooner. For letting the bad man get close to you. For, he paused, his voice cracking. For being afraid. Anya studied him with those old, knowing eyes. You're not afraid, she said. You're just sad. Sad and angry. But you're not afraid. She reached out and took his hand, her fingers small and warm in his. It's okay to be sad, she said. Mama says it's okay to be sad. It's how we know we care. Enzo felt a tear slide down his cheek. He hadn't cried in years, hadn't allowed himself the luxury of such weakness. But this child, this tiny, brave creature, was unraveling him in ways he hadn't thought possible. Thank you, he whispered. Thank you for being so brave. Thank you for keeping us safe, Anya said, her eyes already closing. He sat with her until she fell asleep, her breathing slow and even. Then he rose and walked to the window, staring out at the city below. The lights of Manhattan glittered like 1,000 small fires, each one a story, a life, a secret. I won't let them hurt you, he said to the night. I swear it on my mother's grave. The next morning, Enzo convened a war council in the penthouse's living room. His most trusted lieutenants were present, along with Aldo and a handful of others. Elena had been asked to join, though she sat in the corner, her hands clasped in her lap, her face pale with worry. The cartellis have made a mistake, Enzo began, his voice cold and precise. They've shown their hand. They want Anya. They think she's our weakness. But she's not. She's our strength. He pulled up a series of photographs on the large screen mounted on the wall. These are the cartelli leadership. The ones who gave the order to attack my niece's birthday party. The ones who threatened my family. As of today, they are dead men walking. He outlined a plan of attack. A series of coordinated strikes designed to dismantle the Cartelli family from the inside out. It was bold, risky, and utterly ruthless. But it was also the only way to ensure Anya's safety. There's something else, Aldo interjected. We've identified the source of the leak. It's not Veronica. It's someone inside our organization. Someone close. The room went silent. Enzo felt his blood run cold. Who? Aldo hesitated, his eyes darting toward Elena. Her brother. Elena's brother. He works in the Hamptons estate. He's been feeding information to the cartellis for months. Elena's face went white. No, that's not possible. Matteo would never. I'm sorry, Aldo said, his voice gentle. But we have proof. His phone records. His bank accounts. He was paid handsomely for the information. Elena's hands flew to her mouth, a choked sob escaping her. He came to me just last week, she gasped. He asked about Anya. About how she was doing. I told him everything. He was just being a concerned uncle. I didn't think. Enzo's face was a mask of fury. Where is he now? Aldo shook his head. He's gone. Disappeared. We think the cartellis moved him to a safe house. They're protecting him. Find him. Enzo's voice was ice. I don't care what it takes. Find him and bring him to me. The council broke up, his men dispersing to carry out his orders. Enzo remained in the living room, his hands clenched at his sides. Elena was still sobbing quietly in the corner, her body racked with guilt. This is my fault, she whispered. I trusted him. I brought him into our lives. I put Anya in danger. Enzo crossed the room and knelt in front of her, his voice gentle but firm. This is not your fault. You trusted your brother. That's what family does. He's the one who betrayed us, not you. He reached out and took her hands, his fingers rough against hers. We're going to find him. And when we do, I promise you, he'll pay for what he's done. Elena looked up at him, her eyes filled with tears. Why are you doing this? Why are you so kind to us? We're no one. We're just a maid and her child. Enzo shook his head slowly. You're not no one. You're the only people in this world who see me for who I really am. And I will do whatever it takes to keep you safe. He rose and walked toward the door, pausing with his hand on the frame. Get some rest. We have a long day ahead of us. That evening, Enzo received a text message from an unknown number. It contained a video. He opened it, his heart pounding. The video was grainy, filmed on a phone in a dimly lit room. A man was tied to a chair, his face bruised and bloody. It was Elena's brother, Matteo. A voice spoke from behind the camera, distorted and unrecognizable. You want him back. Vitali, then bring us the girl. The child. Anya. Leave her at the old church on Mulberry Street at midnight. Come alone. No tricks. Or your man dies a slow, painful death. The video ended. Enzo stared at the screen, his hands shaking. They were threatening him with the one thing he could not bear to lose. But they had made a mistake. They had shown him that Matteo was still alive. And that meant they had a location. A trail. A thread he could pull. He called Aldo. I need you to trace this video. Find out where it was filmed. And I need a team ready to move at midnight. We're not playing their game. We're ending it. Boss. What about the girl? What if they're expecting you to bring her? Enzo's smile was cold and predatory. They're expecting me to follow the rules. But I don't follow rules. I make them. He spent the next few hours preparing. He gathered his best men, his most trusted soldiers. He gave them clear instructions: storm the church, neutralize the guards, and rescue Elena's brother. No negotiations. No mercy. At 11:45 p.m., he stood in the penthouse's hallway, his weapons concealed, his mind focused. Anya was asleep in her room, her stuffed bunny clutched to her chest. He paused at her door, watching her sleep, his heart aching. I'll be back, he whispered. I promise. He slipped out of the penthouse and into the night. The city was quiet, the streets empty. He drove to the church, his senses on high alert. The building was old, crumbling, its windows dark. It looked abandoned, a perfect place for a trap. Enzo parked a block away and approached on foot, his men fanning out around him. He moved silently, his footsteps echoing against the pavement. The church's front door was unlocked. He pushed it open, the creak of old hinges cutting through the silence inside. The church was dimly lit by a few flickering candles. Matteo was tied to a chair at the altar, his head slumped forward. Around him, a handful of cartelli thugs stood guard, their weapons drawn. You came, a voice said. It was the same distorted voice from the video. But you didn't bring the girl. Enzo stepped into the light, his hands raised. She's not here. She's safe. And you're never going to touch her. The voice laughed. You think you can stop us? You're outnumbered. Outgunned. You're a dead man walking. Enzo smiled. I'm not the one walking into a trap. He dropped his hands. In that moment, the church erupted. His men burst through the windows and doors, guns blazing. The cartelli thugs were caught off guard, their surprise turning to panic. Enzo moved through the chaos, his focus singular. He reached the altar and cut Matteo's bindings. The man was weak but alive. Get him out of here, Enzo ordered. Get him to the safe house. He turned to face the remaining thugs, his gun raised. The distortion was gone. In its place was a man he recognized. One of Cartelli's lieutenants. A man named Ricci. Ricci, Enzo said, his voice cold. I've been looking for you. Ricci sneered, his hand reaching for his weapon. You think this changes anything? The Cartellis will never stop coming for you. For the girl. For everything you love. Enzo pulled the trigger before Ricci could draw his gun. The bullet hit him square in the chest, and he crumpled to the ground like a puppet with its strings cut. He stood over the body, his heart pounding, his hands steady. They can come, he said to the empty church. Let them come. I'll be ready. The war was far from over. The Cartellis were still out there, still hungry. But Enzo had struck a blow they would not soon forget. He had rescued Matteo, eliminated a key lieutenant, and sent a clear message. But as he left the church, the lights of the city glimmering around him, he knew the battle was just beginning. The cartellis would retaliate. They would come for him, for Anya, for Elena, and he would be waiting if the penthouse had become a fortress within a fortress. After the church, Enzo had doubled the guards, installed new security systems, and restricted movement to only the most trusted members of his inner circle. Matteo was being treated in a private medical facility, his injuries severe but not fatal. He had been used as bait, a pawn in a game that had nearly cost him his life. That Elena had not spoken to her brother since his rescue. The betrayal was too fresh, the wound too deep. She spent most of her time in Anya's room, reading stories, playing games, trying to maintain a sense of normalcy in a world that had become anything but. Enzo watched them from the doorway, his heart heavy. He had spent his entire life building walls around himself, keeping people at a distance. But these two had breached every defense he had ever constructed. And now, the thought of losing them was unbearable. "We need to talk," Aldo said, appearing at his elbow. "We've got a lead on Veronica. She's been meeting with a Cartelli contact, a woman named Rosa. She's the Cartelli family's consigliera, the one who's been feeding them information about our operations." Enzo's jaw tightened. "Where?" "A restaurant in Little Italy. She has a private room there. She meets with Veronica every Thursday at noon. Then we'll pay them a visit," Enzo said, his voice cold. "But not yet. I want to know everything about this Rosa. Her history, her weaknesses, her family." Aldo nodded. "I've got a team on it. We'll have a full profile by morning." Enzo turned back to the room, his eyes fixed on Anya. She was building a tower with blocks, her small hands steady, her face focused. She looked up and caught his gaze, a smile spreading across her face. "Come play with me," she said, and Enzo felt the tension in his shoulders ease. He crossed the room and knelt beside her, his massive frame contrasting with her tiny one. "What are we building?" "A castle," she said, her voice serious. "A castle for the good people. To keep the bad people out." "Good people," he repeated, his voice soft. "Are you a good person?" She nodded, her eyes wide and earnest. "And you're a good person too, even if you don't always know it." He felt a lump form in his throat. "What makes you say that?" "Because you protect us," she said simply. "You keep us safe. That's what good people do." He reached out and ruffled her hair, a gesture of affection that surprised even him. "I'll always keep you safe," he said. "I promise." That night, Enzo received a call from one of his informants. The Cartellis were planning a major operation. They were going to hit his main shipping hub in Newark, a move designed to cripple his supply lines and send a message. But the informant had also uncovered something else. Veronica was not just a pawn. She was the architect of the entire plan. She had been working with the Cartellis for over a year, feeding them information, helping them plan the attack on his niece's birthday party. She had even been the one to suggest using Anya as leverage. Enzo felt a cold fury settle in his chest. He had been played. He had been blinded by his own ambition, his own arrogance. And now, the woman he had trusted was the one who had nearly destroyed everything he loved that he called Aldo. "I want Veronica brought in. Tonight. No excuses. Boss, she's been staying at her penthouse on the Upper East Side. It's heavily guarded. Cartelli men. We'll need to move carefully." "Then move carefully," Enzo said, his voice ice. "But move now." The operation was planned with military precision. Enzo's men surrounded Veronica's building, cutting off all avenues of escape. They moved through the lobby and up the stairs, their footsteps silent on the marble floors. Veronica was in her living room when they found her, a glass of wine in her hand, her face a mask of practiced composure. She looked up as they entered, her eyes widening for just a moment before the mask slipped back into place. "Enzo," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "I was wondering when you'd come. I'm surprised it took you this long." "You're surprised?" Enzo stepped forward, his men fanning out around him. "I'm surprised you thought you could get away with it. Betraying me. Betraying my family. You were supposed to be my fiancé." Veronica laughed, a cold, brittle sound. "Your fiancé? Don't be ridiculous. You were never going to marry me. You were just using me, like you use everyone. I was just smart enough to see it before it was too late. You were smart enough to sell me out to the Cartellis," Enzo said, his voice low. "You were smart enough to try to have my niece killed. And you were smart enough to threaten an innocent child." Veronica's smile flickered. "The child? Yes. I've heard a lot about her. The little oracle. The one who sees everything. Do you really think she's going to save you, Enzo?" Do you really think she's going to be enough to protect you from what's coming? Enzo stepped closer, his eyes burning with a cold fire. She's not going to save me. She's already saved me. And now, I'm going to return the favor. He pulled out his phone and showed her a video. It was footage of her meeting with Rosa, their conversation captured in crystal-clear audio. I have everything. Your meetings, your plans, your betrayal. And now, I'm going to make sure everyone knows exactly what you've done. Veronica's composure finally cracked. Her face went pale, her hands trembling. You can't do this. You can't prove anything. That footage could be doctored. It's not doctored, Enzo said. And even if it was, no one's going to believe you. You're the woman who tried to have a child killed. You're the woman who conspired with my enemies. You're the woman who sold her soul for power. He turned to his men. Take her to the safe house. Keep her comfortable. We have a lot of questions for her. As they led her away, Veronica's protests faded into the distance. Enzo stood in the empty penthouse, his heart pounding, his mind racing. He had taken one of his enemies off the board, but the cartellis were still out there, and they were still coming. The next morning, Enzo received a call from Aldo. Boss, we've got a problem. The cartellis have made a move. They've taken Rosa's daughter. They're holding her as leverage. They're demanding we hand over Veronica in exchange for the girl. Enzo felt a cold fury settle in his chest. They're using a child as leverage, just like they used Anya. Exactly. They know we're not going to let an innocent child get hurt. They're trying to manipulate us into making a mistake. Then we won't make a mistake, Enzo said. We'll give them what they want, but we'll do it on our terms. He spent the next few hours planning the exchange. He would hand over Veronica, but he would also plant a tracker on her. He would find out where the cartellis were hiding Rosa's daughter, and then he would strike that the exchange took place at an abandoned warehouse on the waterfront. Enzo's men surrounded the building, their weapons drawn, their eyes scanning for any sign of a trap. Veronica was escorted to the center of the room, her hands bound. Her face a mask of barely contained fury. The cartelli men emerged from the shadows, their guns trained on Enzo's men. They exchanged the prisoner for the child, a terrified little girl with wide eyes and trembling hands. Take her to the safe house, Enzo ordered. Get her medical attention. The girl was led away, her small footsteps echoing against the concrete. Enzo turned to face the cartelli men, his hands raised, a cold smile on his face. This isn't over, he said. You know that, right? You've made a very big mistake. The cartelli leader sneered. We've made a mistake. You're the one who gave us your fiancée. You're the one who showed us just how weak you really are. Enzo's smile widened. Weak? No. You're the ones who are weak. Because you just handed me the one thing I needed. He pulled out his phone and showed them a live feed. It was a view of their warehouse from the inside. He had planted cameras on Veronica before the exchange. He knew exactly where they were hiding. This is where you're keeping your operations, Enzo said. This is where you're hiding your weapons, your money, your supplies. And now, I know exactly where to hit you. The cartelli leader's face went pale. You can't. I can, Enzo said. And I will. This war is over. And you've lost. He turned and walked away, his men falling in behind him. Behind them, the cartelli leaders were already scrambling, trying to figure out how to salvage their plan. But it was too late. Enzo had already set his next move in motion. Within hours, his men would hit the warehouse, taking out the cartelli supply lines and crippling their operations. Within days, the cartelli family would be nothing but a memory. As he drove back to the penthouse, Enzo felt a sense of satisfaction he hadn't felt in years. He had taken everything from his enemies. And in the process, he had protected the people he loved. That Anya was waiting for him when he returned, her small face lighting up with a smile. You came back, she said. I knew you would. He knelt down and hugged her tightly, his eyes stinging with tears. I'll always come back, he said. Always. That night, Enzo sat alone in his study, staring out at the city. The war was far from over. The cartellis were still a threat. But for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that he might actually win. His phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number, **. You think you've won. But you've only made things worse. The cartellis are the least of your problems. There's something coming. Something you can't stop. And when it arrives, you'll wish you had never been born. **. Enzo stared at the screen, his heart pounding. He didn't know who had sent the message. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. The threat was real. and it was far more dangerous than anything he had faced before. That he stood up, his jaw set with determination. He had survived worse. He had faced greater odds, and he had always come out on top. But as he walked back to Anya's room to check on her, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something that would change everything. And for the first time in his life, Enzo Vitali was truly afraid. The safe house was a converted warehouse in Brooklyn, its exterior a crumbling facade of rusted metal and broken windows. Inside, however, it was a state-of-the-art fortress with reinforced walls, a security system that would make the Pentagon jealous, and enough weapons to arm a small army. Enzo had moved Elena and Anya there after the church incident, unwilling to take any more risks with their safety. That the threat had been real. The text message had been a warning, and Enzo had taken it seriously. He had doubled his security, cut off all unnecessary contact, and begun investigating the source of the message. But so far, his leads had gone nowhere. The number was untraceable, the message a ghost. He sat in the warehouse's main room, surrounded by his lieutenants. A map of the city spread out before him. They were planning the final assault on the Cartelli family, a coordinated strike that would cripple their operations and send them running back to wherever they had come from. But something was wrong. He could feel it, a gnawing sense of unease that had settled in his gut and refused to leave. The Cartellis had been too quiet since the exchange. They had gone to ground, their operations scaled back to a bare minimum. It was as if they were waiting for something, or someone. "I don't like this," Aldo said, echoing Enzo's thoughts. "They're too quiet. They're up to something. They're regrouping," Enzo said, his voice flat. "They're licking their wounds, waiting for the right moment to strike. We need to hit them before they can recover. We've got intelligence on their main safe house in Jersey," another lieutenant interjected. "Fortified. At least a dozen men inside. If we hit them hard and fast, we could take out their leadership in one fell swoop." Enzo studied the map, his finger tracing the route to the safe house. It was a risky move, a full frontal assault on a fortified position. But sometimes, the most direct route was the only one that worked. "Make the preparations," he said. "We move in 48 hours. The next 2 days were a whirlwind of activity. Enzo barely slept, his mind consumed with the details of the operation. He reviewed the plans, checked the equipment, and personally vetted every man who would be participating. Elena and Anya had been moved to a deeper level of the warehouse, a bunker designed to withstand even the most determined attack. Elena had been quiet since the move, her face drawn with worry. She knew what was coming. She knew the risks. Enzo found her in the small kitchen, Anya asleep in a cot nearby. She was staring out a window that had been reinforced with steel bars, her gaze distant. "You should be resting," he said. His voice gentle. She turned to face him, her eyes red-rimmed. "I can't sleep. Every time I close my eyes, I see that night. The church. The men with guns. Anya's face. I keep thinking about what could have happened." "It didn't happen," Enzo said, crossing the room to stand beside her. "You're safe. Anya's safe. That's what matters." "But for how long?" Elena's voice cracked with emotion. "How long before they come again? How long before something happens to one of us?" Enzo reached out and took her hand, his fingers rough against hers. "I won't let that happen. I've spent my entire life protecting people. I've never failed. I'm not going to start now." Elena looked up at him, her eyes searching his. "Why do you care so much, Mr. Vitali? We're not your family. We're not even your friends. You're not just anything." He cut her off, his voice firm. "You're the only people in this world who've ever seen me for who I really am. And that means something. It means everything." She was silent for a long moment, her hand still in his. Then she smiled, a small, tentative smile that lit up her face. "Thank you," she whispered. "For everything." He nodded, unable to find the words to express what he was feeling. Instead, he squeezed her hand and turned to leave. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be a long day." The assault on the Cartelli safe house went exactly as planned. Enzo's men moved through the building like ghosts, their movements silent and precise. They took out the guards with brutal efficiency, clearing room after room until they reached the heart of the operation. The Cartelli leadership was waiting for them, their faces masks of defiance. They had known they were coming. They had been expecting it. And they had prepared. "You think this is a victory, Vitali?" The Cartelli Don sneered, his hands bound behind his back. You think you've won? We've been playing this game for longer than you've been alive. You're just a pawn. A temporary obstacle. Enzo stepped forward, his face cold and impassive. Where is she? Where is the Serpent's organization? Who are the others? The Don laughed, a harsh, grating sound. You think I'm going to tell you I'd rather die than give you the satisfaction? That can be arranged, Enzo said, his voice flat, but before he could act, the building erupted in chaos. The cartellis had rigged the safe house with explosives, a last-ditch effort to take out as many of Enzo's men as possible. The walls shook with the force of the blast, debris raining down from the ceiling. Enzo moved on instinct, grabbing the Don and pulling him toward the exit. Get out, he screamed. Everyone out. They made it to the street just as the building collapsed behind them, a cloud of dust and smoke billowing into the night sky. Enzo stood in the middle of the chaos, his ears ringing, his heart pounding. He had lost men, good men, and he had lost his best chance at finding out the truth. The Don was coughing, his face covered in dust. He looked up at Enzo, his eyes gleaming with a strange satisfaction. You see, you can't win. You can't stop what's coming. It's bigger than you, bigger than all of us. Enzo grabbed him by the collar and hauled him to his feet. What's coming? Tell me. Now. But the Don just laughed, blood dribbling from his mouth. It's already here, he said. You just don't know it yet. He slumped forward, his eyes glazing over. A bullet had found him, a stray round from the chaos. He was dead. Enzo let him fall, his hands trembling with rage. He had lost the only lead he had. And the threat was still out there, waiting. He returned to the safe house, the weight of the day pressing down on him. Elena was waiting for him in the main room, her face pale with worry. Anya was beside her, clutching her stuffed bunny. Are you okay? Elena asked, her voice trembling. Enzo nodded, unable to speak. He walked past them, heading for his private quarters, his mind a whirlwind of frustration and fear, but Anya's voice stopped him. Mr. Vitali, there's something I need to tell you. He turned, his exhaustion making him impatient. What is it? Anya, she walked toward him, her small footsteps echoing in the silent room. I had a dream, she said, her voice soft. A bad dream. There was a man with a mask, and he was coming for us. For me. For Mama. For you. Enzo felt a chill run down his spine. A mask? What kind of mask? Anya hesitated, her brow furrowed as she struggled to remember. It was white, she said, like a ghost, and he had a voice like a snake. He said you would never see him coming. Enzo's heart sank. The Serpent's organization was still out there, and they were still coming. They had just lost one of their leaders, but they had others. Many others. Did he say anything else? Enzo asked, his voice low and urgent. Anya shook her head. That's all. But I woke up feeling scared. Really scared. Like something bad is going to happen. Enzo knelt down and took her hands, his eyes meeting hers. I will never let anything bad happen to you, he said. You understand? I will protect you. No matter what. Anya nodded, but her eyes remained troubled. I know, she said. But what if you can't? Enzo didn't have an answer for her. He hugged her tightly, holding her small body against his chest. And in that moment, he made a vow. He would find the Serpent. He would destroy his organization. And he would do whatever it took to keep Anya safe. Even if it cost him everything. That the dream had shaken Enzo more than he cared to admit. He had spent the night in Anya's room, sitting in a chair beside her bed, watching her sleep. Every time she stirred, every small whimper that escaped her lips, he was on edge, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon holstered at his hip. Dawn came slowly, a pale gray light seeping through the reinforced windows of the bunker. Enzo's eyes were gritty with exhaustion, his mind still churning with the implications of Anya's vision. A man in a white mask, a serpent's voice, a threat that was already here, hiding in plain sight. He rose from the chair and stretched, his joints popping from hours of stillness. Anya was still asleep, her small face peaceful, her stuffed bunny tucked under her arm. He bent down and brushed a strand of hair from her forehead, his touch impossibly gentle for a man who had killed more people than he could remember. I'll find him, he whispered. I'll find him, and I'll end this. He left the room and made his way to the main operations center, where Aldo was already waiting. His consigliera looked as exhausted as Enzo felt, dark circles under his eyes, a cup of cold coffee forgotten at his elbow. Boss, we've got something, Aldo said, sliding a folder across the table. A lead on the Serpent's organization. They're not just cartelli. They're everywhere. We've found connections to at least 3 other families, plus a network of legitimate businesses that serve as fronts. Enzo flipped through the folder, his eyes scanning the documents. Import-export companies, real estate holdings, a chain of laundromats that were clearly money laundering operations. It was a sophisticated network, one that had taken years to build. Who's running this? Enzo asked, his voice flat that Aldo hesitated. That's the problem. We can't find a single point of origin. The money flows through so many shell companies and intermediaries that it's impossible to trace. Whoever's behind this is a ghost. Enzo slammed the folder shut. Ghosts can be killed. I want a team on this. Every single one of these companies. Find out who's pulling the strings. Already on it. But boss, there's something else. Aldo's voice dropped to a conspiratorial whisper. We found a connection to your past. The Serpents organization has been active for over 20 years. That's around the time you made your move against the Mancini family. Enzo felt a chill run down his spine. The Mancinis. He had wiped them out, or so he had thought. But if even one of them had survived, if even one had been hiding in the shadows, nursing a grudge for 2 decades, give me everything you can on the Mancinis, Enzo said, his voice tight. Who survived? Where they went? What they've been doing? Aldo nodded and left the room. Enzo stood alone in the operations center, his mind racing. The pieces were starting to come together, but the picture they were forming was one of a conspiracy so vast and so deep that it threatened to swallow him whole. He was still standing there when Elena entered the room. She was dressed in simple clothes, her hair pulled back in a ponytail. She looked tired, but there was a determination in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. I want to help, she said, her voice steady. I can't just sit here and wait for something to happen. I need to do something. Enzo shook his head. It's too dangerous. You and Anya are the targets. If they find out you're involved, they already know I'm involved, she interrupted. They've tried to take Anya twice. They've threatened my brother. I'm already in this, whether I like it or not. He studied her for a long moment, seeing the fire in her eyes, the steel in her spine. She was not the same woman who had trembled in the Hamptons' kitchen. She had been forged in the fires of the past few weeks, and she had emerged stronger. Fine, he said at last. But you follow my orders. No heroics. No taking unnecessary risks. If I say you're out, you're out. She nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. Deal. The first piece of the puzzle came from an unexpected source. Anya had woken from her dream with a name on her lips. Vincenzo, she had said, her voice small and distant. The bad man's name is Vincenzo. Enzo had frozen at the sound of the name. Vincenzo Mancini, the son of the Mancini Don he had killed all those years ago. A boy of 17 who had been sent away to Europe before the massacre. A boy who had been presumed dead, lost to the world. But he wasn't dead. He was alive. And he had been building his revenge for 20 years. Enzo sat in his study, the name echoing in his mind. Vincenzo Mancini. The Serpent. It all made sense now. The meticulous planning. The long game. The desire to take everything from him, piece by piece. He called Aldo. I need you to dig into Vincenzo Mancini's history. Where he's been. What he's been doing. And I need you to find out where he is now. Boss, if he's been hiding this long, he's not going to be easy to find. Then make him easy to find, Enzo said, his voice cold. Draw him out. Use me as bait if you have to. I want this over. The plan was risky, but it was the only one they had. Enzo would make himself vulnerable, expose himself to an attack that would force the Serpent to show his hand. It was a gambit that could get him killed, but it was also the only way to end the war. He spent the next few days preparing. He moved Elena and Anya to an even safer location, a remote cabin in the mountains that was accessible only by helicopter. He left a trail of breadcrumbs that would lead the Serpent's men to him. And then he waited. The attack came 3 nights later. Enzo was in a warehouse on the waterfront, a deliberate choice designed to give him the advantage of familiar terrain. The Serpent's men moved through the darkness, their footsteps silent on the concrete floor. Enzo was ready. He had planted his own men throughout the building, their weapons trained on the intruders. When the first shot rang out, it was the signal for a coordinated ambush. The Serpent's men were cut down in a hail of gunfire, their bodies crumpling to the ground. Enzo moved through the chaos, his gun blazing, his heart pounding with a cold fury. And then he saw him. Vincenzo Mancini. He was standing at the far end of the warehouse, his face obscured by a white mask. He was watching the carnage with a detached calm, as if it were all just a game. Vincenzo, Enzo called out, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. It's over. You've lost. The masked figure laughed, a cold, serpentine sound. Lost? No, Enzo. I haven't lost. I've just begun. He pulled off his mask, revealing a face that was both familiar and foreign. It was Vincenzo, but older, harder, his eyes burning with a hatred that had festered for 2 decades. You killed my father, he said, his voice dripping with venom. You killed my brothers. You took everything from me. And now, I'm going to take everything from you. Enzo raised his gun, his aim steady. You're not going to take anything. You're going to die here, just like the rest of your family. Vincenzo smiled, a cold, predatory smile. You think I'm afraid of death? I've been dead for 20 years. The only thing keeping me alive is the thought of watching you suffer. He raised his hand, and in that moment, the warehouse exploded into chaos. More of his men emerged from the shadows, their weapons blazing. Enzo's men were caught off guard. Their positions compromised. Enzo moved through the chaos, his focus singular. He had to reach Vincenzo. He had to end this. But Vincenzo was faster. He slipped through a side door, disappearing into the night. Enzo gave chase, his footsteps pounding against the pavement. He caught a glimpse of Vincenzo's silhouette, a fleeting shadow that vanished into the labyrinthine streets of the waterfront. He stopped, his chest heaving, his hands shaking with rage. He had been so close to ending it all. But the serpent had slipped through his fingers once again. That he returned to the warehouse, his men already regrouping, their faces grim. The attack had been costly. He had lost more men, and the threat was still out there. But as he stood in the aftermath of the violence, Enzo realized something. Vincenzo had made a mistake. He had shown his face. He had revealed his identity. And now, Enzo knew exactly who he was hunting. He pulled out his phone and called Aldo. I have a name. Vincenzo Mancini. Find him. No matter how long it takes. No matter what it costs. Find him. And as he hung up, he made another promise. This time, it wasn't just about revenge. It was about protecting the people he loved. It was about ending this once and for all. The war wasn't over. But Enzo Vitali had never been more determined to win. The name hung in the air like a curse. Vincenzo Mancini. Enzo had spent the better part of a week digging into every scrap of information he could find on the man who had become his nemesis. What he uncovered was a story of obsession so deep and so dark that it made his blood run cold. Vincenzo had not simply survived the massacre of his family. He had rebuilt himself from the ashes, piece by piece, transforming into something far more dangerous than his father had ever been. He had spent years in Europe, cultivating connections with criminal networks across the continent. He had married into wealth, used his bride's fortune to fund his revenge, and then discarded her when she was no longer useful. He had built an empire not on brute force, but on patience and precision. Every move he had made for the past 20 years had been calculated with one goal in mind: the complete and utter destruction of Enzo Vitali. And now, Enzo knew exactly where he was hiding. The location was a private island off the coast of Maine, a remote outpost that had been owned by the Mancini family for generations. It was the perfect fortress, accessible only by boat or helicopter, with enough natural defenses to repel even a coordinated assault. But Enzo had something Vincenzo didn't have. He had desperation. We're going in tomorrow night, Enzo announced to his inner circle. The room was silent, his men absorbing the gravity of his words. No negotiations. No warnings. We hit them hard and fast, and we end this. Boss, the island is heavily fortified, Aldo cautioned. We don't know how many men he has. We don't know the terrain. It's a suicide mission. Then it's a suicide mission, Enzo said, his voice flat. But I'm not going in blind. I've got a team of former military operatives who owe me favors. They'll get us in. They'll get us out. And Vincenzo Mancini will be dead before the sun rises. Elena was waiting for him in the small room they had converted into a makeshift nursery. Anya was asleep, her small body curled up on the cot, her bunny clutched to her chest. Elena looked up as he entered, her eyes red-rimmed, her face etched with worry. I heard what you're planning, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You're going to the island. I have to, he said, crossing the room to stand beside her. This is the only way to end it. To keep you safe. Don't, she said, grabbing his arm. Don't pretend this is about us. This is about revenge. This is about the past. And if you go, you might not come back. He turned to face her, his eyes meeting hers. I'm not going to die, he said. I'm going to win. And when I do, we're going to leave this life behind. All of it. We'll go somewhere far away, somewhere they can't find us. You, me, and Anya. Elena stared at him, her lips parting in surprise. What are you saying? I'm saying I want you to be my family, he said, his voice raw with emotion. Both of you. I know I don't deserve it. I know I've done terrible things. But I want to be better. For you. For her. And I can't do that until this is over. She was silent for a long moment, her eyes searching his. Then, slowly, a smile spread across her face. Promise me you'll come back, she said. Promise me you'll come back to us. I promise, he said. And he meant it. The island loomed out of the darkness like a sleeping beast, its rocky shores battered by the relentless waves of the Atlantic. Enzo and his team approached by sea, their black inflatable boat cutting silently through the water. The former military operatives had done their job, neutralizing the island's coastal defenses with precision and efficiency. Enzo moved through the darkness, his weapon at the ready, his heart pounding with a cold, steady rhythm. The compound was a sprawling mansion, its windows dark, its grounds eerily silent. But he knew better. He knew Vincenzo was in there. He could feel it. They breached the perimeter, taking out the guards with suppressed shots that barely disturbed the night air. Room by room, they cleared the mansion, their movements silent and lethal. And then, they reached the study that Vincenzo was waiting for him, seated behind a massive oak desk, a glass of whiskey in his hand. He looked up as Enzo entered, a cold smile spreading across his face. Enzo, he said, his voice smooth as silk. I was wondering when you'd arrive. I've been expecting you. Enzo raised his weapon, his aim steady. This is over, Vincenzo. You've lost. Lost? Vincenzo laughed, a hollow sound that echoed in the study. I've been waiting for this moment for 20 years. Do you really think I'm going to let you end it so easily? He pressed a button on his desk, and the walls of the study began to close in, revealing hidden panels that housed a small army of armed men. Enzo's team was outnumbered, outgunned, but Enzo had anticipated this. He had planned for it. He raised his hand and gave a signal. From outside, the sound of helicopter blades filled the air. His backup had arrived. The study erupted into chaos, the sound of gunfire deafening in the enclosed space. Enzo moved through the fray, his focus singular. He had to reach Vincenzo. He had to end this. He found him in the center of the room, his weapon raised, his eyes burning with hatred. You're not going to win, Vincenzo screamed. I'll kill you. I'll kill everyone you love. Enzo didn't respond. He simply raised his weapon and pulled the trigger that the bullet hit Vincenzo square in the chest. His eyes widened with shock, his body crumpling to the ground. Enzo stood over him, his breathing ragged, his heart pounding. It's over, he said, his voice cold. For good this time. Vincenzo's eyes glazed over, his last breath escaping in a whisper. You think this is over? You've only delayed the inevitable. There are others. There are always others. And then he was still. Enzo turned away, his men already moving to secure the compound. The war was over. The serpent was dead. But as he walked out into the night, the weight of Vincenzo's final words pressed down on him like a physical burden that he returned to the safe house, his body exhausted, his mind still churning. Elena was waiting for him, her face lighting up with relief when she saw him. You came back, she said, her voice trembling. You came back to us. I promised, he said, pulling her into his arms. I always keep my promises. Anya was asleep in her cot, her bunny clutched to her chest. Enzo knelt beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her forehead. It's over, he whispered. You're safe. But as he rose and left the room, he couldn't shake the feeling that Vincenzo's words had been more than just the ravings of a dying man. There were others. There were always others. He returned to the study, his mind racing. He had won the war, but the peace was fragile. There would be more enemies, more threats. And he had to be ready. He pulled out his phone and called Aldo. I need you to start a new investigation. The Serpent's organization. I want to know if there are others. I want to know who they are and what they want. Aldo was silent for a moment. Boss, we've already done that. There's nothing. The organization is dead. It died with Vincenzo. Maybe, Enzo said, but I need to be sure. He hung up and stared out at the city, its lights glittering like distant stars. He had spent his entire life fighting wars, building empires, destroying enemies. But now, he had something he had never had before. A reason to fight for something more. He walked back to the nursery, pausing at the door. Elena was still awake, her eyes fixed on Anya's sleeping form. She looked up as he entered, a tired smile on her face. "Are you okay?" she asked. "I will be," he said, crossing the room to sit beside her. "As long as I have you." She reached out and took his hand, her fingers intertwining with his. "You have us," she said. "Always." And in that moment, Enzo Vitali allowed himself to believe that the war was truly over, that he could have a future, that he could be a good man. But as he watched Anya sleep, her small face peaceful, he knew that the battle for his soul was just beginning. The weeks that followed the island were strange, disorienting. Enzo had spent so long in a state of war that peace felt like a foreign language, a landscape he no longer knew how to navigate. The penthouse was quieter now, the constant hum of security briefings and tactical meetings replaced by the soft sounds of everyday life. Anya's laughter echoed through the halls. Elena's footsteps padded softly across the marble floors. And Enzo found himself standing in doorways, watching them, trying to remember how to be a man who wasn't constantly looking over his shoulder. But the ghosts of the past refused to stay buried. It started small. A car that lingered too long on the street below. A phone call that disconnected the moment he answered. A letter, addressed to him in handwriting he didn't recognize, containing nothing but a single photograph. The photograph was of Elena, taken from a distance. As she walked Anya to a park near the safe house, Enzo's blood ran cold. He had moved them twice since the island, had taken every precaution to ensure their location remained secret. And yet, someone had found them. Someone was watching. He called Aldo. "We have a problem. Someone's been following Elena. I want every inch of that park canvassed. I want to know who took that photo and how they got close enough to do it." Aldo's voice was grim. "Boss, we've been monitoring all the usual channels. There's been no chatter, no whispers. Whoever's behind this is operating completely off the grid." "Then we go off the grid too," Enzo said. "I'm moving them again. This time, no one knows where they're going except me." He hung up and walked to the kitchen, where Elena was making breakfast. Anya was at the table, her small hands wrapped around a cup of juice, her eyes bright and curious. "We need to talk," Enzo said, his voice low. Elena looked up, her smile fading as she read the tension in his face. "What's wrong?" "Someone found us," he said. "I don't know who or how, but they found us. I'm moving you to a new location. Somewhere safe." Elena's face went pale. "But we just moved. You said we were safe." "I was wrong," he admitted. "I underestimated them. But I won't make that mistake again." Anya looked up, her eyes wide with a knowing that always unsettled him. "The bad man is still out there," she said. "The one in the mask. He's not gone." Enzo knelt beside her, his voice gentle. "The man in the mask is dead. I killed him myself. But there might be others. Others who want to hurt us." Anya nodded slowly, her small face thoughtful. "I know," she said. "I can feel them. They're angry. They want to take everything away from you." Enzo felt a chill run down his spine. He had learned to trust Anya's instincts, her uncanny ability to see what others couldn't. And if she said there were others, he believed her. The new safe house was a farmhouse in upstate New York, miles from the nearest town, surrounded by acres of forest. It was remote, isolated, and nearly impossible to find without a GPS coordinate. Enzo had chosen it himself, had personally vetted every inch of the property. But even as he settled Elena and Anya into their new home, he couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. He spent his nights patrolling the perimeter, his senses on high alert. He slept in fits and starts, his hand never far from his weapon. One night, he found Elena sitting on the porch, her knees drawn up to her chest, her eyes fixed on the dark treeline. He sat down beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "Can't sleep?" he asked. "I keep thinking about Anya's dream," she said, her voice soft. "The man in the mask. She's been having it again. Every night. She wakes up crying, saying he's coming for us." Enzo felt a surge of protectiveness, hot and fierce. "I won't let anyone hurt her. I won't let anyone hurt you." Elena turned to face him, her eyes glistening in the moonlight. I know you won't. But I'm scared, Enzo. I've been scared for so long. I don't remember what it feels like to not be scared. He reached out and took her hand, his fingers rough against hers. I know, he said, but we're going to get through this. Together. I promise you. She leaned into him, her head resting on his shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her, holding her close. And in that moment, the weight of the world felt just a little bit lighter. But the peace was short-lived. The next morning, Enzo received a call from Aldo. Boss, we found something. A lead on the others Anya mentioned. There's a network, a shadow organization that's been operating in the background. They're not Cartelli. They're not Mancini. There's something else entirely. What do you mean, something else? Enzo asked, his voice tight. I mean, they're a collection of players from all the families you've taken down over the years. They've banded together. They're calling themselves the Collective. And they've been watching you for a long time. Enzo's jaw tightened. How many? We don't know. At least a dozen. Maybe more. They're scattered across the country, but they've been coordinating. They've been planning. Planning what? Revenge, Aldo said flatly. They want revenge for everything you've done, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to get it. Enzo ended the call, his mind racing. The Collective. It was exactly what he had feared. A coalition of enemies, united by their hatred of him. They would be patient. They would be ruthless. And they would stop at nothing. He gathered his men, outlining a new strategy. They would have to go on the offensive, hunting down the members of the Collective one by one. It would be a long, bloody campaign. But it was the only way to end the threat. But even as he gave the orders, Enzo couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. Something important. Something that would change everything. That night, Anya came to him, her small face troubled. Mr. Vitali, I had another dream. He knelt beside her, his voice soft. What did you see? I saw a woman, Anya said. A woman with red hair. She was holding a gun. She was pointing it at you. And she was smiling. Enzo felt his heart stop. A woman with red hair. There was only one person he knew who fit that description. A ghost from his past. A woman he had loved and lost. A woman he had believed was dead. Natalia. He stood up, his mind reeling. Natalia had been his first love, a fiery, passionate woman who had been caught in the crossfire of his war with the Mancinis. He had watched her die, had held her in his arms as she took her last breath. Or so he had thought. But if she was alive, if she was part of the Collective, his phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Asterisk. Hello, Enzo. It's been a long time. I've been waiting for this moment. Asterisk. He stared at the screen, his hands shaking. The ghost had risen from the grave. And she was coming for him. The name echoed in Enzo's mind like a bell tolling in an empty church. Natalia. He had buried her 20 years ago, had wept over her grave, had carried the guilt of her death like a stone in his chest. And now, she was alive. She was coming for him. He spent the night in his study, staring at the wall, his mind a hurricane of memories. Natalia had been everything to him once. She had been fire and light, a woman who had seen the darkness in him and loved him anyway. He had been young, reckless, and she had paid the price for his ambition. He had watched her die in a hail of bullets meant for him, had held her as the life drained from her eyes. Or so he had believed. But the text message told a different story. She had survived. She had been waiting. And now, she was part of the Collective, a ghost risen from the grave to exact her revenge. Enzo's phone buzzed again. Another text from the same number. Asterisk. You're wondering how I survived. You're wondering why I never came back. Meet me at the old church on Mulberry Street. Midnight. Come alone. Or I'll find the girl myself. Asterisk. His blood ran cold. She knew about Anya. She knew about everything. And she was using the one thing he couldn't bear to lose as leveraged. He didn't tell Elena about the message. He didn't tell anyone. He simply waited until the house was quiet, then slipped out into the night. The old church on Mulberry Street was a relic of a bygone era, its stained glass windows shattered, its pews rotting. It had been abandoned for years, a haunt for the city's forgotten souls. Enzo stood in the center of the nave, his senses on high alert, his hand resting on the weapon holstered at his hip. He heard her before he saw her. The soft click of heels on the stone floor. The rustle of fabric. And then she stepped out of the shadows, and his heart stopped. Natalia was older now, her red hair streaked with silver, her face etched with lines that hadn't been there before. But her eyes were the same, burning with a fire that had once set his soul ablaze. She was holding a gun, her aim steady, her smile cold. "Hello, Enzo," she said, her voice a silken whisper. "It's been a long time." "Natalia." His voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. "You're alive." Surprised, she laughed, a hollow, bitter sound. "I've been waiting for this moment for 20 years. I've been planning. I've been patient. And now, I finally have you right where I want you." He took a step toward her, his hands raised. "I thought you were dead. I mourned you." You mourned me." Her laugh turned sharp, cutting through the silence like a blade. "You left me for dead. You walked away while I was bleeding out on the floor. You didn't even look back." "I didn't know," he said, his voice cracking. "I swear to God, I didn't know." "Does it matter?" She stepped closer, her gun still trained on him. "You killed my family. You destroyed everything I loved. And now, you have a new family, a new love, a new child to protect." Her eyes narrowed, her smile turning cruel. "How does it feel, Enzo, to have someone you love used as a weapon against you?" "Leave them out of this," he said, his voice hardening. "This is between you and me." "Between you and me," she laughed again, a wild, unhinged sound. "There is no you and me. There's just revenge. And I'm going to take everything from you, just like you took everything from me." She raised her gun higher, aiming directly at his heart. But Enzo saw something in her eyes. A flicker of doubt, a hesitation. "You loved me once," he said, his voice soft. "You loved me, and I loved you. Whatever happened after that, whatever I did, that was real. That was true." Her aim wavered, just slightly. "Don't," she said, her voice trembling. "Don't you dare use that against me." "I'm not using it against you," he said. "I'm telling you the truth. I have spent the last 20 years regretting what happened to you. I have carried that guilt every single day. And now, I have a chance to make it right." "How?" Her voice was a broken whisper. "How can you make it right?" He lowered his hands, taking a slow step toward her. "I can't undo the past, but I can choose the future. I can choose to be better. For you. For Elena. For Anya. I can choose to stop the cycle of violence once and for all." Her hand was shaking now, the gun trembling in her grip. "You don't mean that. You're just saying that to save yourself." "I mean it," he said. "I mean every word. I'm tired, Natalia. I'm tired of fighting. I'm tired of losing people I love. I just want it to end." She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes searching his. And then, slowly, she lowered the gun. "You were always a good liar," she said, her voice flat. "But I can see it in your eyes. You mean it. You actually mean it." She took a step back, her hand dropping to her side. "I came here to kill you. I've been planning it for years. But I can't. Because the woman I loved is still in there somewhere. And she still cares about you." Enzo felt a rush of relief, so intense it nearly buckled his knees. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you for giving me a chance." "Don't thank me yet," she said, her voice hardening. "The collective is still out there. They're still coming for you. And they won't stop until you're dead." "I know," he said. "But I'm ready for them." She smiled, a sad, weary smile. "You always were. Weren't you ready for anything except the truth?" She turned and walked toward the shadows, pausing at the door. "I'll give you a head start. 24 hours. After that, I can't protect you. They'll find you, and they'll kill you. It's what they do." And then she was gone, swallowed by the darkness. Enzo stood alone in the church, his heart pounding, his mind reeling. He had come face to face with a ghost, and he had walked away alive. But the threat was far from over. The collective was still out there. And they were coming. He returned to the farmhouse as dawn was breaking, his body exhausted, his mind still churning. Elena was waiting for him on the porch, her face pale with worried. "Where did you go?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I woke up and you were gone. I was so scared. I had to take care of something," he said, his voice gentle. "Something from my past. But it's over now. I promise." She didn't ask for details. She just stepped into his arms, holding him tight. And in that moment, he felt a glimmer of hope. But as the sun rose over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Enzo knew the battle was just beginning. The collective was out there, waiting for him. And he had 24 hours to prepare. He gathered his men, outlined a new strategy, and prepared for the inevitable. The war wasn't over. It was just entering its final phase. And this time, Enzo Vitali was determined to win. The 24 hours Natalia had given him felt like both a lifetime and no time at all. Enzo spent every minute of it preparing, his mind a razor's edge of focus. He called in every favor, mobilized every asset, and turned the farmhouse into a fortress that would make the Pentagon jealous. But even as he worked, a part of him was still reeling from the encounter at the church. Natalia was alive. She had forgiven him, or at least chosen not to kill him. But the collective was still out there, and they were hungry. He gathered his inner circle in the farmhouse's main room, the walls lined with maps and photographs of known collective members. Aldo was there, along with a handful of his most trusted lieutenants. Elena had insisted on being present, her face pale but determined. Anya was in her room, asleep under the watchful eye of one of Enzo's most trusted guards. "We have 12 hours, Enzo began, his voice flat and cold. 12 hours before the collective makes their move. We know they're planning a coordinated strike. We know they have at least 15 members, possibly more. And we know they have resources. Big resources." He pointed to a photograph on the wall. "This is Marcus Webb, former military intelligence. He's their strategist. Without him, they're just a bunch of angry men with guns. He's the priority target." Another photograph. "This is Rosa Diaz. She's their financier. She's been funneling money through a network of shell companies for years. If we cut off her money, we cripple their operation." He moved to a third photograph, his jaw tightening. "And this is the one I'm most worried about. Viktor Volkov, former Spetsnaz. He's their muscle. He's the one who'll lead the attack." The room was silent, the weight of the threat pressing down on them. Aldo spoke first, his voice grim. "Boss, even if we take out Webb, Diaz, and Volkov, there are still a dozen others. We can't hit them all at once." "We don't have to," Enzo said. "We just have to hit them hard enough that the rest scatter. They're a coalition, not a family. They don't have the same loyalty we do. If we break their leadership, the rest will fall apart." He outlined his plan, a series of coordinated strikes designed to dismantle the collective's leadership in a single night. It was risky, audacious, and entirely dependent on timing and surprise. But it was the only plan they had. As the sun set over the farmhouse, Enzo made his way to Anya's room. She was awake, sitting up in bed, her stuffed bunny clutched to her chest. Her eyes were wide and knowing, as they always were. "Are you going to fight the bad men?" she asked. "Yes," he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. "But I'm going to win. And when I come back, we're going to leave this place. We're going to go somewhere safe. Somewhere the bad men can't find us." She nodded, her small face serious. "Be careful," she said. "The bad men are scared. Scared men do stupid things." He smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "I'll be careful. I promise." He leaned in and kissed her forehead, then rose and walked to the door. Elena was waiting in the hallway, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands clasped in front of her. "Come back to us," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "I will," he said. "I swear it." The attack began at midnight. Enzo's men moved through the city like shadows, hitting the collective's safe houses with brutal efficiency. Marcus Webb was taken out in his penthouse apartment, a single bullet to the head that left no doubt about the outcome. Rosa Diaz was apprehended at her country estate, her network of shell companies already being dismantled by Enzo's accountants. But Viktor Volkov was the real prize. He was holed up in a warehouse on the waterfront, surrounded by a small army of loyalists. Enzo led the assault himself, his men fanning out around the perimeter, their weapons trained on the building of Volkov. Enzo called out, his voice echoing in the night. "You're surrounded. Come out, and I'll make it quick." The response was a hail of gunfire, bullets tearing through the darkness. Enzo dove for cover, his men returning fire. The battle was fierce, brutal, and unforgiving. Enzo moved through the chaos, his focus singular. He had to reach Volkov. He had to end this. He fought his way through the warehouse, his weapon blazing, his heart pounding with a cold, steady fury. He found Volkov in the center of the building, surrounded by his remaining men. The Russian was a mountain of muscle, his face a mask of cold contempt. "You think you can win," Vitaly Volkov sneered. "You think you can stop us? We're just the beginning. There are others. There are always others." Enzo didn't respond. He simply raised his weapon and fired. The bullet hit Volkov square in the chest. He staggered, his eyes widening with shock, then crumpled to the ground. His men surrendered, their weapons clattering to the floor. It was over. The collective was broken. Enzo stood in the middle of the warehouse, his breathing ragged, his hands shaking. He had won. The war was over. He could finally go home. That he returned to the farmhouse as dawn was breaking, his body exhausted, his mind still buzzing with adrenaline. Elena was waiting for him on the porch, her face lighting up with relief when she saw him. "Enzo," she breathed, rushing into his arms. "You came back." "I promised," he said, holding her close. "I always keep my promises." Anya came running out of the house, her small feet pounding against the wooden steps. Enzo knelt down and caught her, sweeping her into his arms. "Did you beat the bad men?" she asked, her eyes wide and hopeful. "I did," he said. "They're gone. They can't hurt us anymore." She hugged him tight, her small arms wrapped around his neck. And in that moment, Enzo Vitali felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. But even as he held them, a part of him knew the peace was fragile. There would always be threats, always be enemies. But for now, he had this. He had them. And that was enough. That the morning after the raid on Volkov's warehouse, Enzo woke to sunlight streaming through the farmhouse windows. For the first time in weeks, he had slept through the night without waking to the sound of gunfire or the weight of a nightmare pressing down on his chest. He lay in bed for a long moment, his body still aching from the previous night's violence, but his mind strangely quiet. He rose and made his way to the kitchen, where Elena was already preparing breakfast. The smell of coffee and bacon filled the air, a simple, ordinary scent that felt almost sacred after everything they had been through. Anya was at the table, her small hands wrapped around a cup of juice, her eyes bright and cleared. "Good morning," Elena said, her voice soft and warm. "You look like you actually slept for once." "I did," he admitted, a small smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "It's a strange feeling." Anya looked up at him, her expression thoughtful. "The bad men are gone now, aren't they?" Enzo crossed the room and knelt beside her chair. "They are," he said. "The collective is finished. I made sure of it." "Then we can stay here," she asked, her voice filled with a child's hope. "We don't have to run anymore." He reached out and took her small hand in his. "We don't have to run anymore," he said. "We can stay here. Or we can go somewhere else. Anywhere you want. The world is open to us now." Elena turned from the stove, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "What are you saying?" He rose and walked to her, taking her hands in his. "I'm saying I'm done," he said. "I've spent my entire life fighting wars, building empires, destroying enemies. And I've realized that none of it matters. None of it means anything without someone to share it with." She stared at him, her lips parting in surprise. "What do you want, Enzo?" "I want you," he said simply. "I want Anya. I want a life that doesn't involve bloodshed and fear. I want to be the man she sees when she looks at me. The good man." Elena's tears spilled over, streaming down her cheeks. "You already are that man," she whispered. "You've been that man from the moment you knelt down in the garden and listened to my daughter." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "Then let's start over," he said. "All of us. Together." Anya climbed down from her chair and toddled over, wrapping her small arms around both of their legs. "Does this mean we're a family now?" she asked, her voice muffled against their legs. Enzo knelt down and scooped her up, holding her against his chest. "Yes," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This means we're a family." The weeks that followed were a quiet revolution. Enzo dismantled his empire piece by piece, handing over control to trusted lieutenants and walking away from a life that had consumed him for decades. There were whispers of weakness, of decline, but he didn't care. He had something far more valuable than power. He had a family that they settled in a small coastal town in Maine, far from the shadows of New York. The house was a modest cottage overlooking the ocean, its walls painted a soft blue, its garden overflowing with wildflowers. It was a world away from the gilded cages and concrete fortresses of his past. Enzo spent his days learning to be a father, a partner, a man who could find joy in simple things. He taught Anya how to fish, how to skip stones across the water, how to identify the constellations that dotted the night sky. He cooked with Elena, learning recipes that had been passed down through her family for generations. He walked the beach at sunset, his hand in hers, the weight of the past slowly lifting from his shoulders. That one evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun dip below the horizon, Anya climbed into his lap and looked up at him with those ancient, knowing eyes. "Are you happy now, Mr. Vitali?" she asked. He smiled, a smile that reached his eyes and filled his chest with warmth. "Yes," he said. "I'm happy." I'm happier than I've ever been. Can I call you Papa now? She asked. Her voice shied. He felt his heart swell, the words catching in his throat. I would like that, he said. I would like that very much. She leaned in and kissed his cheek, her small arms wrapping around his neck. I love you, Papa, she whispered. He held her tight, his eyes stinging with tears. I love you too, Anya, he said. I love you more than I ever thought I could love anyone. Elena watched them from the doorway, her face soft with emotion. She walked over and sat beside them, her hand resting on his knee. We have a good life, she said. All of us. Together. He nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. We do, he said. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure it stays that way. Years passed, and the cottage by the sea became a sanctuary, a place of peace and healing. Enzo never returned to his old life, never looked back at the empire he had left behind. He received occasional updates from Aldo, reports of the city's underworld evolving without him. But he felt no pull, no desire to return to the shadows. Anya grew into a bright, confident young woman, her gift for seeing the truth in people serving her well. She went to college, studied psychology, and dedicated her life to helping others. She never forgot the man who had saved her, who had chosen love over vengeance, and who had shown her that even the darkest soul could find redemption. Elena and Enzo grew old together, their love deepening with each passing year. They traveled the world, visited places they had only dreamed of, and returned home to their cottage by the sea. They laughed, they cried, they built a life that was theirs and theirs alone. One evening, in the twilight of his years, Enzo sat on the porch watching the sunset, Anya's hand in his. She was a woman now, but she still curled up beside him like the child she had once been. You saved me, Papa, she said softly. You saved me and Mama. You gave us a life. He shook his head, his voice thick with emotion. No, Anya. You saved me. You showed me that there was something worth fighting for. You showed me that I could be a good man. She leaned her head on his shoulder, her voice a whisper. I love you, Papa. I always have. I love you too, he said. I always will. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, Enzo Vitali felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had spent his life in the darkness, but he had found the light. He had lost everything, but he had gained something far more valuable. A family, a love that would endure beyond death. And as he closed his eyes, he knew that he would carry that love with him into whatever came next. It was not an ending, but a beginning, a promise of a life well lived, a love that would never fade.